Shalom, more praise to Yahweh Bashmi Ashai. This is part 2 of this video, going into Joseph and his dreams and the history of dreams and its relation to ancient Egypt. So let's get right to it. So part 1, I basically went into Joseph having a dream of him of his brothers basically bowing unto him, and how his brothers had conspired to kill him, and how his father had also given him a coat of many colors, and how his brothers were jealous of the fact that he was the favorite and they sought to slay him, but instead they sold him into captivity. They sold him to the Ishmaelites, who in turn wound up selling him to the Egyptians. So this is Joseph. Basically this is the history of Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dream. In prior chapters, you can read about Joseph interpreting a dream of a butler and of a baker, who was also in prison with Joseph. Joseph had the butler. The butler came to Joseph, who was in prison with Joseph, and this particular butler and this particular baker, they had upset the king, or in other words, upset Pharaoh. And they were placed in the dungeon, or placed in the prison. And they had dreams. And Joseph interpreted the dream for the butler. And basically told the butler that the butler would go back to doing his duties in Pharaoh's house. In other words, the butler was in prison, but eventually the butler would be released and he would go back to doing his normal duties for Pharaoh, being his cupbearer. And when the baker heard when the baker had heard that was a good interpretation, he then in turn told Joseph his dream. But Joseph had told him that he'd be put to death, which he was. And when the butler had went back to Pharaoh, or rather after Joseph had interpreted the dream of the butler, he told the butler to remember me. In other words, speak on my behalf, because my brothers had basically sold me to the Ishmaelites, and I've been brought here. So speak to Pharaoh on my behalf, so he can get out of prison. But the butler didn't remember him. So here's Genesis chapter 41, verse 1. Let's get right to it. Genesis 41, verse 1. And it came to pass, the end of 2 full years, that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. So in Pharaoh's dream, Pharaoh was standing by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat flesh, and they fed in the meadow. So kine is talking about cows, referencing cattle. They were fat flesh, meaning they were plump. They were plump cattle, and they fed in the meadow. So they was eating provender. In other words, eating grass, for example, eating the food that cows would eat. So they were feeding in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean flesh. So these were kind that were not well-favored. They were ill-favored, meaning these are the kind of cattle that you wouldn't want. They were ill-favored and lean flesh. In other words, they were very skinny. Whereas the other kind were fat flesh. In other words, plump. And stood by the other kind upon the brink of the river. So the ill-favored and lean flesh kind stood by the well-favored and fat flesh kind, and the ill-favored and lean flesh kind did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kind. So Pharaoh awoke. So the skinny cows ate up the fat ones in his dream, and then Pharaoh woke up, and he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. So 7 ears of corn came up. Now we know 7 represents completion. So when it says 7 well-favored kind, it doesn't actually mean 7. It means a complete amount, multiple. Like if I say there's several minutes left until 9 o'clock, it doesn't literally mean 7 minutes. Just several, multiple. So he saw 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. So these are plump stalks of corn, ears of corn, good ears of corn. And behold, 7 thin ears and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. So you saw 7 ears of corn blasted with the east wind. Let's go to that real quick. Blasted. What does that mean? Blasted. Shaquap. Shaquap. Scorch. The scorch. Blight. Scorch ears of corn. Go to that word blight real quick. Blight. A plant disease, typically one caused by fungi such as mildews, rust, and smuts. A thing that spoils or damages something. Okay, let's go back. The word there for east wind is just quadum. So basically, it was being blown with a wind. And this particular corn was blasted with the wind. But when it says it was blasted, it means it had blight. So it had some kind of fungi or some type of infection on it. So it says, and behold, 7 thin ears and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. So these 7 thin ears of corn was blasted. They were filled with blight, infections, and so forth. And it says, and the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. So those 7 thin ears of corn, the ones that were filled with blight, had devoured the 7 rank and full ears, meaning they had devoured or eaten or consumed the good corn, the plump corn. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So the Pharaoh had 2 dreams. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. So Pharaoh had told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret the dream for Pharaoh. So let's go into Egypt and let's go into the history of Egypt and let's look at the significance of dreams. Now this is from a website called touregypt.com. It's called Perchance to Dream by Anita Stratos. Egypt perchance to dream, dreams and their meaning in ancient Egypt. The New Age subject of dream interpretation isn't new at all. Thousands of years ago, ancient Egyptians used the messages in their dreams in order to cure illnesses, make important state decisions, and even to decide where to build a temple or when to wage a battle. Dreams were considered to be divine predictions of the future. They were messages from the gods that could be foretelling of impending disasters or conversely of good fortune. Therefore, understanding the significance of one's dreams was an important part of the culture. Dream books were kept throughout the ages, and these writings give us a glimpse into the thoughts and concerns of the common people of ancient Egypt. And the Babylonians had dream books. You had dream books throughout Mesopotamia, all throughout the ancient world. Through these writings, we know that some of the most prevalent images in ancient dreams included breaking stones, having one's teeth fall out, drowning in the Nile, having one's face turn into a leopard, climbing the top of a mast at sea, drinking warm beer, and eating white bread. Some dream interpretations were based on punning. Get it real quick. Making or involving a pun or play on words. Like if I make a statement and say no pun intended. Like if I say, like you had a rapper named Big Pun. If I say Big Pun is big, no pun intended. I don't really mean he's big. I mean like he's a big celebrity. But big is in his name. No pun intended. You understand? If I say Biggie Smalls is big, man. No pun intended. Right? So some dream interpretations were based on punning or verbal connections between similar words. So you may have had a dream and this word, you may have had a dream about something and they'll make a connection between the words, between the things that you dreamt about, that you had a dream about. So it says something that fascinated Egyptians. In other words, verbal connections. For example, the words for donkey and great were homonyms. Therefore, in other words, they had association with one another. Were homonyms. Therefore, a dream, because when you go to the word homonym, It means same. Each of two or more words having the same spelling or pronunciation but different meanings and origins. Okay. Homonyms are words that have different meanings but are pronounced the same or spelled the same. So they got different meanings but are pronounced the same or spelled the same. Like beer, like beer. You have beer like an animal, but then you have beer like something that you drink, but then you have beer like if a person is naked. So that's a homonym. They have association with one another. Maybe the same pronunciation. So it says, for example, the words for donkey and grape were homonyms. Therefore, a dream about eating donkey meat meant good luck. This may sound lighthearted, but in fact, dream interpretation had definite and serious religious significance. In their simplest form, dreams were deemed to be either good or bad. Since dream interpretation was not an exact science, some interpreters based the meaning of a person's dream on whether he was a follower of Horus, in which case he was considered an equal person, or whether he was a Seth worshipper, short-tempered. Here are some examples of dreams in their meanings. Dreaming of a deep well meant prison. A mirror indicated a second wife. A shining moon represented forgiveness. A large cat symbolized a bumper crop. Dream interpretation. Dream interpretation became so important. See that, a bumper crop. See, we go. See, let's click on that. What happens? Bear with me 1 moment. Now, you type in bumper crop. It says an agricultural bumper crop is a crop that has yielded an unusually productive harvest. The word bumper in this context comes from a usage that means something unusually large, which is where this term comes from. So it said a large cat meant a bumper crop, or a large cat meant large amount of crops, large production. Like the large cow represented. Can you break down the dream? Well, we're going to go into the dream later on. But they could interpret the dream fully, of course, because it showed you large cows, thin cows, and the thin cows devouring large cows. Showed you good corn and bad corn, and thin corn, the bad corn or thin corn devouring the good corn. So they couldn't really break that down. But let's keep reading. Dream interpretation became so important that sometimes people took specific measures to encourage the help of a god through a dream that would resolve a problem or make a decision. This moved the dream state from a private experience at home to the dream temple of the god, and it was referred to as dream incubation. So they actually had temples dedicated to different gods, and they would go to these temples and they would sleep, believing that this god would influence their dreams. Many gods had dream temples, indicating that no one god was responsible for influencing people's dreams. I might go into that later on in the show, but I might not because I don't want the show to be too long. I want to mainly deal with the point. The temples were open to everyone on every social level, with the only requirements being faith in the god whose temple you selected, and purity, which could mean that a ritual of cleansing, fasting, or abstinence may have taken place in the days prior to entering the temple. All right. So with that, I'm going to close right there. It's about 15 minutes, 13 minutes. I'm going to close right there, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to continue from here on the next part. So with that, I'm going to close because I'm going to bring a lot of information out in the next part. And I don't want this part to be too long. It's already 13 minutes, and I want each part to be beyond 15 minutes. So that I'm going to close. I'm going to say, oh, praise Yahweh, Shema Shah, double line to Apostle GMS. All brothers learn something. Shalom.